Coming up on this week's show, some lost Sega Channel games have been found.
Got games to preserve retro gaming.
And we chat 90s multimedia with Scala creator Jon Bøhmer.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you every Friday with our amazing mates at Bitmap Books. Now, maybe you're thinking of Christmas present ideas for yourself. Have you seen Commodore Amiga, a visual compendium? Now, this book is a real celebration of the games that define the Amiga, from the early days of Defender of the Crown and Barbarian through the stuff that we all played. Cannavora, Speedball, 2 Worms in there as well. More than 420 pages and showcasing more than 140 of the biggest Amiga games. Definitely worth a look, and check out the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 456, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to the podcast. I say warm as well because doesn't make you guys nice and cozy at the moment, with trying my best not to look at my smart meter with the heating turned up, because it's starting to snow in the next few hours here in the UK. As the nights get a bit darker and a bit colder and we get ready for Christmas not long now. I know that actually we do have some rather big plans for the Christmas quiz episode that is literally just weeks away now.
Oh no, I'm not going to win again, am I?
Are you guys revising?
Never.
I think Ravi has to find someone to be in his team yet, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So always our favourite time of year. More of that coming up. We'll keep you posted on that over the next few weeks. And I do have to apologise as well if I put my phone on silent, because it's been vibrating quite a bit today. Now that we are on the social media network of the moment, we're on Blue Sky.
Yeah, we've been on Blue Sky for quite a while. I remember
about a year, haven't we?
when it was invite only, and I sent an invite to Dan, and you were like, "What is this?" And we're also on other new cool stuff like TikTok.
Yes,
I've just got an account on that as well. We've been doing quite well on TikTok, actually. It's quite cool to get onto these new social media networks and show the youth of today what it was like back in the days.
Us old farts, yeah. I mean, for people that use Blue Sky, it's basically, it reminds me of what Twitter used to be like in like 2007, 2008. You know, there's not a load of people on there at the moment, but it seems like there's a nice community, load of retro heads on there. And it's kind of exciting because there's been like, a load of new people signing up to that over the weekend. It kind of reminds me of, in like 2006, 2007, when everyone left MySpace and went to Facebook.
Yeah.
Feels a bit like that, yeah.
I stayed on MySpace
till the bitter end.
Yeah. The thing I like is it's got custom feeds on it. So people are making their own feeds, like, PS1 games and stuff. And then you can select that and view all the posts through that, which I think is pretty cool. It's good to keep on top of all these new social networks and stuff. And hopefully we'll be on our domain name soon. But at the moment, we're retrohour.bsky.social.
Yeah, just search Retro Hour in there if you are one of the many new users for Blue Sky. You want to give us a follow on there. It's always nice to grow new community. So enjoying that so far. Now, today we're going to be going back to the age of multimedia. Now, that was an early 90s buzzword, wasn't it?
Yes, multimedia. Do you remember getting like multimedia CDs, and they promised so much, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember. It's funny because we were talking on the Patrons Hangout that we do. We do this like every month for our patrons. Basically a massive Zoom call, isn't it, where we all get together and geek out. If you'd like to join the next one, theretrohour.com to join. But yeah, we're talking about a package on the Amiga called Can Do.
Yes,
we're talking about like a new Amiga games are actually being made with Can Do.
Yeah, well,
interesting.
Scala is what we're talking about today with Jon Bøhmer, and he's an inventor and entrepreneur, and he really pushed multimedia back there. Now, Scala, if you initially saw it, I don't know, have you played on it, Dan? Have you done anything with it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was talking about Can Do a moment ago, which was really, that was a multimedia package for the Amiga that wasn't as advanced as Scala, but I remember getting that on an Amiga format cover disc and playing around with it. It must have been about 93, maybe they gave that away, when multimedia was like the big buzzword. And kind of making these, because really it let you make little screens where you could have buttons that you could click on that would do certain actions. So you could have like a picture that you clicked a button on, kind of what really CD-ROM went on to really do with encyclopedias and obviously the World Wide Web shortly after that as well. But Scala was really next level, wasn't it? That was a package that came out on the Amiga. And I remember these being used all over it, particularly in places like information kiosks at museums and places like that. And I was actually playing around with it because when you did your Amiga event earlier on in the summer, anyone that passed the Retro Hour stand where we're selling some of our books may have seen a little rolling demo running on an Amiga CD32 that I actually put together the night before, after a few pints with you guys, about 3 o'clock in the morning, on Scala.
Yeah,
so, yes.
and that was a very basic usage of it. Like, I thought
it was good.
A lot of people, I'm just dissing your presentation here, but a lot of people, they thought it was like presentation kind of software, but really it came from the industry. And Jon Bøhmer, when he created it, it was amazing. It was a way of titling and doing displays with a gen lock, nice scrolling text and stuff. And in 1999, he actually networked it up. So he had TV stations that would basically have little Scala setups, and then a modem would dial up in 1989, fire out an update and update all the graphics. I think that's like really amazingly pioneering. But then later on, he had stuff like controllers that were actually added to it. So you could plug your video camera in there. It would then, be able to control the camera, rewind it, play it at different points. You can do video editing on there. You could do some pretty cool graphics over it. Also, do you remember those really early touchscreen interactive displays it used to have where it used to slam the CRT to get any kind of response from it?
Yeah, they weren't as good as like an iPhone or something today. Definitely not that responsive.
No, and this laid the foundation for a lot of the stuff that we see today. And Scala, it kind of went on after Amiga died. So Jeff Porter was actually employed by Scala later on. They had a lot of the old Amiga team that they bought into Scala. A lot like
Jeff Porter was an engineer on the Amiga, wasn't he?
Yeah. And, a lot like the video toaster as well. It kind of had its legacy beyond the machine. And even today, Scala's used all around the world. I saw a great photo of a King's Cross station, and, they were having lots of outages, and one of the displays like crashed, and it had a Scala logo going up and down on it. And that was like a few months ago.
Yeah, I'm looking at Scala.com. There's still got, it's an exclamation mark in a box, isn't it? That's been used since the
very
days.
Famous design as well, that is.
Yeah. So, you actually brought back a memory there. You mentioned about doing TV production on it. And I do remember, again, I think I did get an older version of Scala on a magazine cover disc. And I do remember bringing my Amiga into school because, just in case you guys didn't realise quite how cool I am, I was actually part of the school AV club. So, we'd after school, we'd mess around.
Did you have like
cameras.
a cap, like AV club?
I wasn't that cool, Ravi. Come on. But yeah, it's we used to basically hang around for a couple of hours after school and mess around with video cameras and make films that we'd submit to film festivals and that kind of thing. But I did actually bring my my Amiga in to do the scrolling end credits using Scala.
Yeah, well, remember like watching some of those TV channels that would have lots of videos playing on them, and they'd have like little samples of what was going to come up, previews and stuff like that. Occasionally, they would crash, and people in America would be tuning into TV channels, and they would see guru meditation software failure going on, and some of them were running Scala. And it's really interesting to hear about this from Jon and the whole kind of story in the background of how it was invented.
It's interesting because obviously most people, when you mention the Amiga, they think of like the great games, but obviously this whole other side of it, I mean, it was huge in video production before the Mac took over. Obviously, we did an episode with Tim Jennison about the video toaster that was a really interesting one. If you want to check that out, have a look in the archives. But I even remember stuff like there's a TV show called The Chart Show.
Yes.
That used to be on TV here in the UK. And when I got an Amiga, I remember watching that and thinking, that mouse pointer and icons look a bit Amiga-like. Turns out it was actually made on the Amiga back then. So I think the fact that it could do PAL and NTSC video out of the box probably made it really easy for TV production. So, really interesting topic. So I'm looking forward to finding out a bit more about this. A definite icon of the Amiga that went on to kind of revolutionise the industry. So we're going to be hearing more about Scala with our special guest, Jon Bøhmer. He'll be coming up on the podcast in around half an hour from now. But of course, we cover all aspects of retro on this podcast, retro tech, and of course, lots of retro gaming as well. And first half of the podcast is when our little team of jumped up joystick jugglers chat about the news stories of the week.
You're turning more into Dominic Diamond as we go on.
I pinched that one from Namrud off Bad Influence.
Ah, there you go.
I've got my sources. So let's talk about the Sega Channel. Now, this is something that I wasn't really aware of when it was a thing back in the 90s. I mean, again, mid-90s, heavily into the Amiga back then. But Sega Channel, it was a service that was really ahead of its time, wasn't it? And you guys got any memories or experience of this?
No memories or experience of it. Did it even come out in the UK?
I looked that up before, and apparently it did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
but later on, I think 96, 97, it was around for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know the actual modem for it has become like a collector's piece and can be quite expensive. But yeah, you would buy a modem, which you would attach to the Mega Drive, one of its many peripherals that you can attach to it, and obviously connect to dial-up internet.
It was cable modem, it did it actually. So I think it was over cable, yeah.
Dial-up, sorry, it was cable modem, yeah. And then you could download games, but it was similar to the Super Nintendo one, where it was at certain times on certain days you could download games, and it was onto a blank cartridge that came with the modem, like the Sega Channel cartridge, and you would download the game onto it, and then it'd be stored on that game. And like you say, it was around 95 to 97 it ran, I believe. And obviously you'd have to pay to have the internet, and then you have to pay Sega for that subscription service as well. And then obviously you had to initially buy the modem and everything. So I don't think it was very cheap. I don't think very many people had it. And obviously a lot more popular in Japan. And obviously over the years, many of the games, which there isn't loads of, have either been lost or were lost and have been found dumped onto these cartridges that people have then dumped onto the internet for everybody to download.
Yeah, because I've looked at some of the episode guides, and you're right, basically it worked like a channel, didn't it? You had an EPG, and it's only what time you could download these certain games to your system. And there was a lot of the games you'd expect, the big Sega games, Shinobi and stuff like that was on there as well. But there were a select few that were exclusive to the service.
Yes. Yeah. I should have been clearer with that. Yeah. I actually forgot that there was other games on there that, were games that got full physical releases. But the games we're talking about today are the ones that didn't have those physical releases and would get lost over time. And they're always being rediscovered. Now, this one, 2 this week have been discovered. And it's kind of blowing my mind how they've been discovered. But the 2 games in question, which aren't the most exciting games in the world, but still pretty cool, are Klondike Solitaire and The Chess Master. Now, the Chess Master one kind of confused me a little bit. I knew about the Klondike Solitaire. I always knew there was a solitaire game on the Sega Channel. But the Chess Master confused me because I had that on Game Gear as a child. Right. And I was like, did the Chess Master not come out on the Mega Drive or Genesis, like as a physical game? So I started digging because the Chess Master was everywhere, with the old guy on the front of the box.
Yeah.
And just a chess game, nothing much to it. It wasn't like Battle Chess where there was like animations and stuff. It was just you played chess against the computer. And I was looking it up, and it came out on pretty much every system of the time other than the Mega Drive and Genesis. And it was planned to have a physical release in 1992 and 1993, but for whatever reason, it never happened. So Sega put it out on the Sega Channel in 1996.
Right, interesting.
And it never got that physical release. But now it is there. It has been dumped on the internet for everybody to play if they want to. They want to play a bit of Chess Master on their Sega Mega Drive or Genesis.
And it looks like it's got options to like play against another human and stuff like that. So I guess you could, play online on the Sega Channel.
I don't think you could. I think it was just couch. Gaming,
like co-op. So yeah.
Against each other.
Old school Ravi.
But the way these have been discovered is it was in a forum, and a member of Sonic Retro forums, a member named Ndiddy, has dumped these and reverse kind of engineered them. I'm not too sure. So another user posted a file, but it was like a picture file or something, and he managed, and Diddy's managed to reverse engineer it from like the image file and download the games. I'm not too sure how that's worked. I don't know if you guys know.
I assumed it was like basically a recording of what the Sega channel was putting out at the time.
Right.
And he's just kind of decompiled it and extracted this game from there, is how I read it.
Yeah.
I mean, that would seem logical, I guess. But yeah, I mean, the fact these games were lost titles, weren't they? People didn't have these in the collection, because there is like a ROM pack that you can get of like the Sega Channel exclusives. I've got a feeling from reading now there's only a couple of games left that are kind of missing now. So this kind of puts it more towards a complete collection. And
they're fairly like standard games, but like Klondike's got a banging soundtrack. It's still got the Sega music vibes on there. I'm like, quite cool, therapeutic.
The thing I'm taking away from this is the fact that Joe had a Chess Master on his Game Gear. Did you ask for that for Christmas one year there instead of Ninja Gaiden or Mega Man? I want Chess Master.
Oh, you know what? Troops all coming out now. You know how you said you were in the AV club? I was in the chess club.
Here we go.
Hey, I played chess for the county.
All right, big man.
Right, we're gonna have a chess
for
fight.
me. I played chess for me.
Ravi was in the nationwide AV club as well. He's got us both. But yeah, I mean, I always love seeing stuff like this. I think we're obviously big fans of game preservation, so people have been able to rediscover these long lost titles many years down the line. I think it's very cool. So if you do want to download that, I will link that up in this week's show notes. Now we're on a bit of a theme of recovering classics. This is actually very cool. Actually, Blizzard have celebrated 30 years of Warcraft with a very cool remastered battle chest. Now this features, they say battle chest there, not battle chess. This is remasters of Warcraft 1 and 2. These are very, I must admit, I'm not a Warcraft player, never have been. I know you were quite into that world back in the day, Ravi.
Hugely. This is 1, 2, and 3 as well. Wow. Like, just looking at this is absolutely amazing, because these games, I still fire up DOSBox and play them today. Warcraft 1 was pretty basic. It was that kind of RTS, but above view, had a very comical style. And Warcraft 2 to me was peak Warcraft. I kind of stopped playing after Warcraft 3. But 2 was just amazing. It was during the period when, you had Command and Conquer coming out on other companies, Westwood Studios, but this was Blizzard's main one. And oh my God, just the voice acting in it. It was so much fun. Had that whole fantasy kind of genre, but also it had the polish, number 2, that 1 didn't have. And some of the voice acting, like, I've invented a flying machine and stuff like that. And job's done. And like, yes, sir. All of that kind of stuff. It was just great and a really good experience.
Here's another one for you. I bet you didn't know, you wouldn't have known this about me, Ravi. I loved Warcraft 2.
Oh, yes.
Tides of Darkness and the expansion Beyond the Dark Portal. I got them, obviously they came out in like 96 originally, the second one did. I got them, you remember in game in the early 2000s, as in the game, the retail shop, they would sell like the greatest hits editions of these games for like a $5. And I remember picking them up then, and I played Warcraft 2 death. And then all my friends started playing World of Warcraft, and I was like, and at the time I didn't realize it was the same, obviously not the same game, but the same world. And it wasn't until I was older and I put 2 and 2 together. But I actually much prefer, I've never been into World of Warcraft, but I much prefer.
Yeah, I kind of lost it on Warcraft 3, and like a lot of people love that game, and that's when it all kind of became a bit different. But I love the dynamic of having to get the gold from the mines getting depleted, having to get the wood, the amount of farm for survival, having to balance everything. I thought that was great, and how the different units, like the archers were really fast, but then also awful at melee, and like the great balance. And what they're doing is a remaster of it at the moment.
Yeah.
what do you think of the graphics? I think they look smashing. I think they've done it in exactly the cartoony style that it should be done.
Yeah, in my mind's eye, like that's what I remembered it looking like. And then you watch the trailer and you go on YouTube and watch old footage of it, and you forget how
low res it is.
How low res and pixelated it was. Yeah, I like the look of it. I think they've done it justice. And as you say, in a world where all these retail real-time strategy games were very, what were the graphics? They were very, like pre-rendered graphics with like Command and Conquer and stuff. I always thought the animation style of Warcraft stood out.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely like cartoony, very comic book vibe, like cell shaded. And I think
it was definitely more fun. It felt more fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely like, didn't take itself seriously. And I like that they've recaptured that and how bright and nice it all looks. It kind of shows you the kind of like the frames of animation, and that there wasn't actually loads of frames of animation in the units and stuff like that when they're walking around. Shows that off a little bit more, but I think that just captures the essence of it, and obviously like the time period of it and stuff like that. But yeah, I think this is wicked. It's going to be £35. It's already out.
Yeah, and it comes with the originals as well.
Oh, does it? That's awesome.
Yeah, which is cool. And also it has them all updated as ranked play.
Yes.
So, if you want to do it on the OG one. Now, one thing that I always found in the Warcraft games was scrolling was always a bit hard. I always remember, slamming the mouse to the left and slamming it to the right just to get the scrolling. So hopefully they sort that out and it's a bit smoother and faster. And then it can get more into like a StarCraft kind of style of doing it, really fast and tons of units. And
it does say that there's, quality of life. So obviously other than the kind of like updated visuals and stuff, but they've also updated the audio, upgraded the UI and the UX, it says. I'm not too familiar what the UX means.
It's user experience.
Yeah.
There we go.
I think it's it's a bargain for what it is at this price. It's something I'd definitely get, and I'd be able to give a bigger look to Beyond the Dark Portal as well, but also Warcraft 3, which I don't think I've given a chance. But then I don't want to slip into WoW, because I know so many people that are like, I've lost my life to WoW.
That is what's always put me off playing anything in the Warcraft series. I think, I look at it and I think maybe I would enjoy that. But then, it does frighten me that I might just suddenly look around and I've been in my room for about 4 days and growing a beard and not seeing sunlight or anything.
Yeah, you can still do that with Warcraft 2, Dan.
Yeah. What system did you play it on back in the day, Joe?
Just my home PC, just my whatever my mum had going on.
We've learned in this episode that Joe was part of the chess club and he was a PC gamer.
I was for a time.
Right, if we can find Warcraft chess, which I'm sure there is some, that'll be the ultimate battle, won't it, Joe?
Yeah. An education this episode. So if you want to get hold of that, they are available now. Like you said, bargain I think for 3 remasters and the originals as well. So if you want to get hold of that is available now. I'll put that in this week's show notes. Now, another service that does incredible things for game preservation, and I was watching Modern Vintage Gamers video all about the importance of game preservation recently. Really good vid, as always. And it does seem to be obviously an ongoing hot topic in the world of retro gaming and preserving old games. And one service that's always done a really good job of this is GOG, which obviously stands for Good Old Games, which is basically like it's like Steam for retro games, really, isn't it? But they kind of repackage a lot of these old titles and polish them up and make it possible to run them hassle-free.
They also
on modern
do
systems.
them DRM-free, which is really important. Polish them up. They do a good job of it on popular titles. Some of the more rare ones that they have out there, sometimes GOG's a bit hit and miss, but it does a lot, so it's hard to support so many titles and stuff, and there's always like a forum you could go on that says just change this setting and then you'll get it running.
Well, I think that is the aim of this new program that they've started called the GOG Preservation Program. Because like you said, obviously, new versions of Windows and stuff come out all the time, and often there'll be maybe games that came out 4 or 5 years ago, and they're not always updating them constantly. But there is, at the moment, there's 100 titles in this program, and from what I've seen of this, the idea is that they're going to continually make these playable on modern systems. So these are going to be like, initially these 100 games that they're going to make sure they keep an eye on and maintain compatibility with current and future systems. So there should always be a way to play these games.
It's definitely nice to see a lot more acknowledgement, hype around this, because it's something I was thinking about earlier on when I read this article. We used to talk about it, a good few years ago, about how like films and TV shows and everything, they all get preserved and, it all gets kept in different places, museums, vaults, whatever. It all gets preserved, but video games, it's not really happened. But over the last couple of years, we're seeing much, much more of it. Obviously, it's become so much more like, I don't want to use the word mainstream, but more prominent. And now it is becoming more mainstream that it's like, okay, we've got this massive catalogue, the biggest form of media in the world now, bigger than Hollywood and everything. Yeah, maybe we should try and preserve some of this while we still can and keep it playable. And even in a digital way, I think that's great.
And I think archive.org, it's absolutely amazing. But going down recently, kind of, me being unable to access stuff and you as well.
I was looking for things. I was like, oh, yeah, I'll just download that. Oh, it's not there.
Like completely panicking. And I'd hate to imagine it, but a world where, these kind of things are gone. Like GOG and archive.org and stuff.
And they're trying to take down archive.org, not only hackers, but also the authorities as well.
Well,
companies, aren't they?
They're all run by volunteers and they haven't got, amazing amounts of money. And I'm sure they've got like companies breathing down their neck and wanting. Yeah,
Sony's the latest one, I think.
Yeah. So, it's a real precarious thing, even though you're preserving stuff. It's tough.
And I think they've picked some good titles to start with as well. You got things like Heroes of Might and Magic 3, Diablo, plus Hellfire, Fallout New Vegas, System Shock 2. So basically they're giving them, it's an official preserved by GOG label, and they've undergone like rigorous testing. They've updated it for the latest operating systems, making sure that, like you said, all those settings are maintained for smooth performance on Windows 11.
There as well. And
it's DRM free, like you said, that they're famed for. So, yeah, I do think that is important. And, you made a good point there, Joe. I think, often there are some companies, like Nintendo do a good job of like kind of keeping their archives in check. But the amount of people we've had on the podcast that, work for gaming companies in the 80s and 90s, and they were like, oh, yeah, we put a game out, then after that, we formatted over the discs with something else, or all went in the skip when we sold the company up to someone else.
Yeah.
It wasn't really thought of that it was important to preserve it back then. So I think the fact that these efforts are going on now, should mean that in the future we haven't got that problem. Obviously, a lot more games come out now than did 30 years ago. So it's going to be a bigger job, I think, in the future. But it's good to see that programs like this have started up. And obviously, starting with 100 titles, I think is a good first step. So, hopefully that will continue and grow. So if you want to check that out, that is online now. Now, the Atari Jaguar is a system that you guys know I've been a collector for many years now. I've been a fan of the underdog systems. I do like the failed consoles and what could have been. And it's always nice when the homebrew community take these kind of underdog systems and show them a bit of love. And there has actually been a bit of a movement recently in the Atari community of porting Atari ST games onto the failed 64-bit wonder that was the Jaguar, including, this is the latest one. This is a game called Wings of Death. Now, you played this before, Avi? This was a shoot 'em up, wasn't it, that came out on the Amiga and the ST?
I've never played this one, no.
Well, this came out in 89. It was by Thalion Software. Basically a vertically scrolling shmup, as we call it today, or a shoot 'em up. Also, the graphics are quite nice on it. I've got to admit, in terms of gameplay, fairly standard for the time. I probably prefer to play something like, Deluxe Gallagher, or even, there are other games on the Jaguar that are probably better shooters. But I think the fact that, these Atari ST ports are possible because, obviously the Atari Jaguar's got that 68K CPU in there that really was intended to be just a controller for the game controller ports, and to kind of tie everything else together, the more powerful Tom and Jerry chips that are in there. But obviously a lot of developers kind of thought, actually, we can just port games over from the Mega Drive or the Atari ST and use that instead. It has made it possible for the homebrew community to do these, relatively straightforward ports, and obviously means that we do get a bigger game library on the Atari Jaguar. And obviously, this team are big fans of Wings of Death. So it looks like, from what I've seen, they've actually done some nice improvements for the Atari Jaguar using the system's more capable hardware to deliver a nicer port.
It does look like a very Falion game. The
graphics 100%.
Yeah, the way it's drawn and stuff. I like it. It looks nice. Looks like a good fun. And I guess like the scrolling improvements and stuff, and using that 64-bit hardware.
Yeah, it's got 60 frames a second. Yes. Higher color mode. They said they haven't put exactly how many colours are in there. Looks nice, I've got to say. 2 versions of the soundtrack as well, one that's on cartridge and one that's going to be on CD. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, they're doing a physical release of this then, by the sounds of it, in 2025. The fact they say there's going to be 2 versions of the soundtrack, I'm wondering whether they're going to be putting this out on, because there's a picture of the cartridge that they were showing off at the recent JagFest event, which is like an annual Atari Jaguar conference, JagFest 24, that was on earlier this year. And there's a picture of the cartridge, but the fact they said it's there's going to be a version on of the soundtrack on CD, I'm wondering whether they're going to be doing a version of this for the Atari Jaguar CD, which would be very cool.
Would be cool. There is a picture of it there, with the game running. Obviously, it's running from the cartridge, but that would be interesting. So, all 10 people who have a working one can play it.
Yeah, I might get the game count into double figures as well, because it can't be, it might be just over double figures. But yeah, I mean, it's very cool. I always like seeing new stuff coming out for, systems like this. Whether I buy it or not, I don't know. I mean, if I was a big fan of the game, I probably would. But I mean, I'm sure there are.
It seems like one of these things that Atari should have done back in the day, but it's kind of good that it's getting completed and that people are putting the effort into, move ST games onto the Jaguar.
It isn't. You make a good point there, because obviously on the Amiga CD32, a large portion of the catalogue was basically Amiga games dumped onto a CD, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder why there weren't more kind of ST ports back in the day, because obviously they could have done CD compilations, couldn't they, for the Jaguar CD of like a load of ST games and stuff.
Yeah. And it's good to see that they're actually bothering to do improvements as well. So yeah, big it up.
Yeah, I think it's very cool. So if you're a fan of classic shoot 'em up games, it does look like a decent one. Maybe worth a revisit again. That is coming out in 2025 for your Atari Jaguar. Making Joe want one even more now, isn't it? The new games are coming out for it. Now, we have been talking about game preservation this episode, bit of a theme. Turns out that Epic Games, obviously better known today for the mighty Fortnite, but obviously the hit that we all remember them for back in the day is Unreal. And it turns out that actually they are one of the companies that have given their blessing for the Internet Archive to host the game, the installation files, and let anyone download and play the games for free, which I think is really interesting and a really good move to see as well.
Yeah, they're doing Unreal and Unreal Tournament, but to be honest, the cat was out of the bag years ago with these. These were massively pirated. Unreal Tournament, Game of the Year edition was. I don't know if there's any stats on it, but it's probably one of the most pirated PC titles, or at least up there in the top 10. So that would have been shared around all your kind of line wires and stuff like that. Really, really decent title, and I think it's good that they've allowed them to put it up. Also, it makes me think: are they going to be remaking it, or do they just not care that much anymore about Unity? Interestingly, I remember in October in the year 2000, they patched Unreal Tournament for the first time. So you only needed to install it with a CD, and the patch meant that you didn't need the CD afterwards. So,
nice.
Usually it detected the CD and needed that to play. So I think with Unreal Tournament, they were kind of just like get as many players on it as possible. It was a huge success. It was Game of the Year anyway. So, I think that's good that it's available to more people because it's such a good title.
And it is on GOG anyway. I mean, as some people have pointed out, you can buy it on GOG if you want. But I think the fact that obviously, I don't know about you guys. I mean, I like playing, like I was playing Quake not long ago, and I thought, well, I want to play that on my Pentium PC. I want to play it on the original system, like, I want to hear that hard disk like clicking away in there, and I want to use a period accurate keyboard and mouse and that kind of thing. Same with console games as well, even though I do play like, the classic Sonic games on modern hardware and Switch and stuff, there's always something about playing them on the Mega Drive with the original controller and the original system.
Yeah, like
so I think
you could even play UT in the browser nowadays on Real Tournament. So, but like being able to play it on the original system, having there's menus and stuff like that. Yeah, it's big nostalgia as well. And it's a nice thing for archive.org. Hopefully it'll bring a lot of traffic. And this is kind of what we were on about last time, the preservation. I'm sure they would be scared to have someone as big as Epic. And, putting that title up there is a really risky thing. They have big cojones at archive.org, I think, when they put stuff up and then kind of wait for takedown notices and stuff like that. But yeah, it seems that, Epic have just been like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously not earning any money off sales of the original game anymore, apart from on GOG. But I think for people that want to basically burn a CD and play it on like, their old Pentium 2 or whatever, it is nice that they've kind of given their endorsement for archive.org to do that. And, I wish more companies would do it. And I'm hoping maybe this does start a bit of a trend of companies kind of being like, yeah, that's fine. So I remember like the first company I really remember doing this, to an even further extent was id Software. I remember when they put the source code out to Doom.
Well, yeah. And also the whole shareware concept was pretty much putting it out to everybody, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember that because there was always that thing that, Doom couldn't run on the Amiga. And then obviously, just a few years later, I mean, when did Doom come out? Was it 93?
Yeah.
I've got a feeling they open sourced it in like 96. So it was only a few years after it went on sale, where they basically give it away for free to everybody, which really, I was kind of hoping more companies would have done that back then, but obviously didn't really catch on. But yeah, it is interesting to see that, Epic Games, obviously, I imagine they're earning a couple of quid off Fortnite, not hard up for money. But it's nice to see companies acknowledging that, these older titles have still got value, so give them to the community, and anyone can play them.
And like there's a huge modding scene as well. Like I remember maps with Unreal Tournament and like different game modes and just skins. So much stuff's out there that you can just download. So, it makes it an infinitely huge game as well. And Unreal as well. Unreal was really good fun. And that was kind of like the crisis of its day, with just the amazing graphics.
Although on the downside, it probably does mean that, as you kind of alluded to at the start of this story, then they probably are not going to be doing any further games in the series or reviving it. So.
Which I really, really want. I reckon we should do like a FPS shooter retro hour patrons Christmas meetup or something like that, where we just pick a few on Steam and then just go crazy.
That sounds like fun. Yeah. It's that ruined my Christmas, everyone handing my ass to me. So, if you want to get hold of that, it is on archive.org already, but you have Epic's blessing to download it, so don't feel guilty. So if you want to check that out and the rest of the stories, of course, you find them all in the podcast show notes on your podcast app, or you can head to the website, click straight through from theretrohour.com. That is the same place if you want to join our patrons community. Of course, we do have a great little bunch.
I was thinking about this the other day. So we're on episode 456 of the main show. We've now done, God, how many After Hours episodes have we done?
45.
45. Okay, so we've hit over 500 episodes of, not necessarily the Retro Hour, but us as a team have recorded over 500 episodes now, with 45 of them being the Retro Hour.
There's a lot of talking.
There's a lot of talking. That is a lot of talking. But if you do want to listen to another 45 episodes of the Retro Hour After Hours, which is all available on our Patreon, on our second level at the moment, that's all there. And, I love it. I love the after hours because we get to kick back and have a laugh and kind of give a little bit more of like our opinion on things, not necessarily like talking about the news or what's happening that week, etc. We talk
pure nostalgia, isn't it?
It's pure nostalgia. Yeah. We talk about, years gone, in the past, or we talk about our favorite consoles, our favorite games for those consoles. Oh God, what was the one we did the other week, chaps?
We did controllers,
controllers,
and
me and Dan were arguing on our favorite and worst controllers because we had.
It's a good job we went in the same room together, Joe, for that one. Yeah.
And then also the one I loved that we did was the famously bad games that we never played before. We all went away and played them, and then came back and gave our opinion.
And there weren't all bad views, actually. There's a few surprises in there, weren't there?
Some half decent games in there. Yeah. So, obviously, there's the After Hours, which we've got 45 episodes of.
And you'll get a new one before the end of the year?
We'll get another one in there before the end of the year. Also, we have the Hangout that we do usually on the last Sunday of the month. We did one about a week ago. We're going to do one again around mid-December, obviously, just because of the holiday period.
Christmas party one?
Yeah, everybody being busy and stuff like that. You get the episode early some weeks as well, as part of our Patreon, and you also get it ad-free. And something we've been doing for a good few years now, we always add in an extra 2 news stories as well, if that's your jam, on the Patreon one as well. So plenty on there.
We do get some people saying, I wish there was more of the news. But, because, it's kind of 50. So if you want a bit of extra news every week, we do like another 10, 15 minutes most weeks. So for our patrons, so really good time to sign up and join our wonderful patrons community. You also get access to the exclusive area in Discord as well. And really be helping the Retro Hour continue into 2025 and hopefully beyond. So all the details to join our community are at theretrohour.com. While you're there as well, there is still some copies of the Retro Hour book.
What an ideal Christmas gift that would make.
Yes. I don't know, you guys might be like me. I've had my mum asking me, Samantha's been asking me, what do you want for Christmas this year? And I got my birthday before then. And it's like, I can never think of anything. So if you're the same, you're in the same boat, you're like, the Retro Hour book, perfect little present. And you can buy them through our website, theretrohour.com, containing 10 incredible interviews, some of our favourites, and also 5 exclusives as well. People like Andrew Braybrook, who we've never had on the podcast, is just a written exclusive in there as well. David Rose in there. Who else we got? I'm trying to think who else in the book. Nolan Bushnell, obviously. Trip Hawkins, just absolute industry legends in written form. Beautiful pictures as well. A real celebration of the podcast and the gaming industry from the people that made it happen. So those are available right now. You can buy ebooks or hardback copies. We have still got some available. Head to theretrohour.com. All right, well, thanks for checking out the news this week. We'll have more for you on next Friday's podcast, of course. And next, taking you back to the 90s, back to the Amiga, the multimedia craze, talking all about Scala with our special guest, Jon Bøhmer. He's next on the Retro Hour podcast.
You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here today with Jon Bøhmer. And Jon is the inventor of an amazing piece of productivity software I absolutely loved. It was a great multimedia piece of software for the Amiga, and that was Scala. I think it's totally underrated, and we're going to go deep into the world of Scala and the world of Amiga. How are you doing, Jon? Thanks for coming on.
Fantastic. Such a great surprise to sort of be... to get an inquiry to talk about the good old days, because it's about more than 30 years ago. So this is like back from the blast from the past.
Yeah. It's nearly hitting the 40th birthday of Amiga, actually, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I started, Scala. It was called Digital Vision, and I started it on the 9th of October, 1987.
Oh, wow. Well, before that, we're going to go back to your very first computer experience. Do you remember the first time you ever saw a computer or some kind of like digital imagery or a game that stood out to you?
Yeah, so I wasn't really interested. I saw the VIC-20 and with the cassette recorders and all. It never caught my attention that much. And I had some of that green stuff on the black screen, kind of computing, CPM, whatever, at school. Went to the States as a foreign exchange student and had some some Apple II. Same thing. It was almost impossible to get any color out of it. And then what happened is a friend of my host brother, he had the Amiga 1000. And I went to see it. And then from that point on, I was totally in love. Like, there was no, like, I already learned how to program. So I knew Pascal, I knew, BASIC. I also learned how to type, which turned out to be a huge blessing. I had the typing in school. And I also had video production in school in the States. So I was in Detroit in a high school where they had their own video production studio on campus, used for local cable network and so on. So we had like a 3 or 4 camera setup with switchers and, CGI and all kinds of stuff. So that background and that interest for audiovisual timed so perfectly with me seeing the Amiga for the first time. And then as soon as I got back to Norway to finish high school, I took up a loan, 25% interest, whatever, at the time. I bought the Amiga, and I realized that this is a machine I can make a lot of money using for different purposes.
Well, you were based in quite a rural location in Norway. Was it like a chicken farm or something? I remember hearing.
Yeah, it's an important part of the story is the chicken farm thing. My father's a chicken farmer, and we had about 25,000 chickens, and so I had my own sort of office or like in the attic of the building there, and then I used to just make a little extra money to tend to chickens and do other small work on the farm. But I needed to make money to buy my stuff, so and pay down my Amiga loan. But I also had there was a local video store that opened, and I saw in a newspaper an ad that said the first one to come into the shop 3 days from now, whatever, will get a video camera for 5 kroner, which is like 50 pence. So I jumped on the bike and I went down and I just lay down in the front of the shop for 3 days until the shop opened. I got my video camera. So now I had the Amiga, I had the video camera. I managed to scrunch somehow from my American friends. They sent over a 2 megabyte RAM expansion module, which was really important. And then I had a DigiView set up with a surveillance camera pointing down on a stand with the color splitter. So I was actually able to digitize, any kind of photos and stuff in color. So that was my basic setup. And also had a Sony Video 8 recorder and a Genlock. So now I was able to record different videos for local companies. And I would I would edit everything on the Amiga and add titles using whatever software is available. So I was doing that for like the first sort of 6 months after I started the company. And I was able to offer stuff, kind of quality that nobody else could do in that price range. You had to have like very professional TV studios or video studios to do that kind of quality.
Yeah, I know the Amiga in particular, that Genlock technology as well. Because, the Amiga could output in standard video resolutions, couldn't it? Like PAL or NTSC, which was great for, obviously, television and video production. I mean, how cutting edge was the Genlock? And for people that are not familiar with what it does, explain kind of why that was powerful and what it did.
Yeah, so because the Amiga was synchronized to, the vertical blanking interval, so it's PAL or NTSC, as you mentioned, so 25 or 30 frames per second, while as the other computers at the time, they were using monochrome monitors or like the Macintosh or the PC, whatever, so they were not able to output PAL or NTSC signal. And the Amiga even took it further because in addition to the RF and the PAL outputs, it also had, if you connected the Genlock, so you put the video in from your video recorder, whatever, and then you put the Amiga into it. And the output would then replace the color 0, which would be the background color on your screen.
A bit like green screen today, I guess.
Yes, it's kind of like that. So but it replaced everything in the color 0. So whatever you painted in color 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, up to color 16 colors or 32 in low res, would then be, on top of the video and very good quality. And the Genlocks were also very cheap. They were like, you can get them down to, I guess, like £100. So this was something that more and more people started using for video. But with Amiga 1000, there was so few people who had that machine in the beginning in 87, around there. So I was like, my trade secret is I had access to much better tools than anyone else for the price. And so, but after 6 months, they made a discovery where I went to this local cable station and I told them, look, you could just connect this Amiga to the RF network and you can pick a channel that you could dedicate to showing your own information to your viewers. And there was, communication law in Norway said that as a cable provider, you have to communicate with your customers. So they were sending out letters saying, oh, here's the channel lineup and, here's the number you can call if something goes wrong, that kind of stuff, And so lorries and lorries of letters, to hundreds of thousands of subscribers in some cases. So I thought, okay, we can just put the Amiga there, plug it in, and then I showed them like deluxe video or something like that. And then they told me, oh, that's an awesome idea, but you have to come and do it because we don't understand how this software works. And mind you, this is before anyone had even seen a mouse, right? So, I mean, it's very early.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, I really don't want to do that job, but I realized there's a business opportunity here. So I asked my friend if he could, I made some sketches of the user interface. And I went to him and I said, can you please code this up and then we can sell them a software that is so easy to use that anyone can learn how to use it in 5 minutes.
And that was like a simple kind of slideshow presentation.
That was the first version of InfoChannel. It was 0.97L, and the L was, we never got around to 1.0, but because we started selling it, but the L was a big breakthrough because it meant you can actually store your presentations. Save your presentations. L is in lager in Norwegian, which means to save. So we figured out how to save it, and then I went to the biggest cable station in Norway, in Oslo, and they just bought it straight up. So I was like, okay, we have something here now, and then what am I going to charge for this thing? So I was like, okay, normal Amiga software, it's like 200, 300 pounds, around that range. Deluxe paint, deluxe video, Aegis animator. That kind of stuff. So I thought that's not going to work and these guys don't care about Amiga. Let me just sell them an Amiga plus, let's say, 1,400 pounds. Well, they totally agreed. I think I gave 50% discount for the first customer. But once I had that reference, I managed to sell it to Telenor, which had about 30 cable networks. Norcable, which had like 20. And so I was like, okay, wow. I'm 20 years old. I hit like jackpot on my first attempt. I'm selling 2 floppies for 1,400 pounds here with the cost of what, 4 pounds plus a printed manual. But nobody cared about the manual because it was so easy to use.
That's a good return on investment, yeah.
Yeah, especially when you start selling like dozens of them in one go. So I was like, oh, this is like drugs except legal. And then I started thinking, okay, we need to make a better version. Actually, I went to Amiga Developer Conference in San Francisco. I think that must have been 88. And of course, it was legendary people, like Dave Haney in all black, black tie, black shirt, black hat, black sunglasses, giving a speech about the Amiga 2000. And it was like I was in heaven, But then they started showing this new product that they had licensed called Amiga Vision, which was like a multimedia authoring tool.
Yes.
And then it was icon-based. It was really cool. And then I remember seeing that thing, and then they were saying, oh, we're gonna throw this in for free with every Amiga. So then I saw my business just down the drain. I remember I went home to the hotel room, stared in the ceiling, and then I made a decision. Okay, we need to make an even more, a better version of InfoChannel so that we can, beat these guys. I'm quite competitive in nature. And it turned out that we managed to get Scala 1.0, which was, for the more consumer or for, audiovisual presentation stuff. I couldn't charge 1,400 pounds for that. So I chose I think I charged like 200 or 300 pounds. But that version actually made it to the shops before Amiga Vision was done. They took forever to get it done. It was buggy. And then in the meantime, we just kind of took the whole Amiga market, managed to bundle some older versions of Scala, let's say, with all the new Amiga 2000s and so on. So by the time Amiga Vision came on the market, nobody cared because Scala had just taken the whole, audiovisual market.
Well, before we really get deep into Scala, InfoChannel was a really kind of industrial aimed product. But how did you go about updating the firmware as well? We're updating what was actually displayed on there, because you created some amazing kind of network back then. If you tell us about that.
Yeah, that's what's called Infonet, which was an add-on we made for InfoChannel, and this is going back to the Telenor customer. They had like 30 different cable networks, and they wanted to update via modems to each of the stations, because they, like in Lillehammer, which is not so far from where I come from. This is where we had the Olympics, so Winter Olympics 1994. They had the transmission station was on top of almost on the mountain. So the guy had to sit in his office, he had to save it on the floppy, and had to drive up to the mountain and plug it in and reboot the computer in order to change the content. And I was like, that's stupid, So we got a modem. I remember I got a really funky 9600 baud Nokia modem back in the day. And then we designed the software so that you could dial up automatically. First of all, I found a guy who had made a very good terminal program for Amiga called Encom, Daniel Block. And I said, okay, he knows how to make telecom software. Please make a module so we can communicate and update. And the software would then dial up, and it would check which backgrounds were already on the receiving side. And then it didn't send the backgrounds, just the Scala script, which is just a small ASCII file. With the strings and the colors and so on, and which font and location and all that. So it was super good. And then we would make a dial-up list in the software, so you could dial up, maybe 30 of these networks, and you could even have different information at different locations, and you could merge what you sent out from central location, central office, together with what was created locally. It was pretty sophisticated. 1989, so that was the first multimedia network in the world. And we didn't know at the time, of course, that that's sort of like writing history, but, let's say 6 years before the web started gaining popularity.
Yeah, it's incredible technology for the time. And when you think of kind of the way the industry went after that as well, really groundbreaking. I'm wondering as well, obviously working with TV networks, what was it like kind of installing the systems in the TV buildings? And also, did you have any issues with stability? Because I know the Amiga had no memory protection, for example. It was quite easy to crash the system if something went wrong and get that famous
Guru, meditation error.
That's the one, yes.
Yeah, so of course that was all about you had to write. So when we wrote the code, a lot of the guys, they were even younger than me, right? And I was super young, so I managed to find. I went all around Norway to look for the best programming talents. My friend from my hometown, Stig, he's a pretty good programmer, but he was doing the user interface. And then I needed someone to do a really performant player. So I needed to find someone who could actually do the smooth transitions and everything. Initially, we just used a player from something called TV Show, because they had a public domain player. So we just used their file format and wrote to that and used it. But then I decided we need to have our own super smooth scrolling, and wipes and all that stuff, So then I found this really cocky programmer who had written in a local Amiga magazine called XX, a Norwegian Amiga magazine. He had written a machine code assembly language, a tiny, tiny little piece of code that would bounce like thousands of balls smoothly around the screen. Like far better than the balls demo that came with the Amiga, on the workbench.
Yes.
I thought, that's a cocky guy. Let me get him. And so he started working on the first player we developed was 100% written in assembly. So that's absolutely crazy. And of course, we needed to support overscan, so that you don't have the square limitation. Let's say in the graphics, we need to be able to reach all the way out on the PAL signal, and also we needed to all the scrolling stuff, because we were developing this for the broadcast audience, and we're thinking, okay, this is going to go out on TV, so we need to compare the quality of our output with the quality of whatever's on TV, whatever TV graphics, on other TV channels. So you can't have you go to the info channel on your cable network and then you see stuff like jumping like they would do on a PC or a Mac, whatever, completely, or even blinking because you're not synchronized the update of the screen with the vertical blanking. So, you needed to refresh the screen when the when the beam was at the top above the image, so that you get a super smooth. So all that became, and double buffering, of course, so that you build the image behind and flip it. So those kind of techniques we used, and then we started inventing all these wipes. We had 100 wipes, different types, any way we could imagine. And then if we could mess around with the co-processors, with the coppers and Agnus or whatever they're called, and then shrink the picture so it looks like you can actually shrink the picture down and then take it back up again.
Yeah, some of those effects were really like demo scene-y, but also I saw a lot of video also being played on some of the preview guides and stuff like that. How did Scala communicate with a video source, and was it like VHS players connected to it with specialist cards or laser discs? Or
it was easy to support laserdisc because the gen locking and it's very perfect playback. But of course, the content on video disc was more limited, but you couldn't just record your own content, kind of thing. But we made that implementation, and using the gen lock, so that looked super smooth, kind of like an MPEG, when that started coming. And then, but we can also control different things. We developed Echo, which was the infrared remote control kind of, so you could teach it the different remote controls that you needed for VCR. So basically with that you can support anything.
But there was also a bunch of crazy Echo, sorry to interrupt, but you could basically do video editing with that, couldn't you? Because you could tell the VCR to rewind to certain points and then start basically a whole kind of thing that you'd run Scala, you'd run the video at the same time, capture all of that output. And and
it had to do the video editing stuff had to happen sort of like in the background, because you wanted to use the screen for gen locking, and displaying graphics. So that way you could actually then control the video sources, and you would wind back a little bit further. And so that when you started playing, the jittery output from the VHS would kind of disappear before you pressed record on the other VCR, because you would use two, and then you would time the appearance of the Genlock graphics so that fit nicely within, the stabilized picture and all that. So that was a cool, and it didn't cost much. It was a pretty cheap little thingy that we developed. So that was one of the few hardware products that we sort of had out, because, it was mostly software, except for we had the dongle that we made, our own video production protection dongle that we made our own. And we had different colors depending on different products. So the yellow was info channel, and I think the red was multimedia. I'm not sure, green maybe. But that was just to stop some of the piracy. But of course, cracked versions would then appear and so on, which we, that's like the greatest compliment can be paid as a software developer, is that someone actually takes the bloody time to crack your software. So that was fantastic. I have a couple
I've never heard a developer say that before. You're the first, Jon.
No, we were like that, but then again it was cat and mouse, right? So we came up with a dongle, and then so on and so on. But if you can just sit down and copy, use Marauder or whatever and make a copy, then come on, man, that's too easy, so we needed to give a little work on it. And but the other thing we did was for the info channel, we would put the name of the user in the title bar on the top of the picture, and for each user, because you could do that because it was a 1,400-pound program, right? And so one day we were watching, I think it's 1990 or something, we were watching Poland against Norway playing football, and in Poland. So, and then you see the graphics and everything, yellow cards and nice graphics, and we're thinking, okay, this is good. This could be Amiga. You're watching football at home with all the popcorn and the beer and the mates, and then you see the scrolling titles, and it says, okay, this is the company that made the titles, these are the production and so on, and then suddenly, boom, you see the whole Scala or info channel menu. Wow. Like they pressed escape before they went off air. So
great advert though.
Yeah. So no, what we did is we had recorded these things. We went back and looked at the scrolling titles, and I called down to our distributor in Poland and said, this company here, are they a customer? And they're like, nope, we haven't sold anything to them. So I said, okay, just send them an invoice.
Yeah.
So that's so we made 1,400 pounds just watching. By the way, Norway beat Poland 3-0 So that's back in the day when we used to beat, England and Brazil and stuff, we used to be pretty decent. So anyway, so that's one story. The other one is when I was married, I got married, my wedding in Kenya. So my wife is from Kenya. So we had a fantastic 3-day wedding down there with everything. And so her mother had hired a videographer to document the wedding. And of course, we had a whole bunch of Scala guys in the wedding, and so this guy was like, oh, yeah, so how do you edit your videos? No, I use Scala. I was like, so they came to me and said, John, even your video guy is here in Kenya is using Scala. I said, wow, that's quite amazing. And then they told him, oh, this is the guy who founded Scala. He's the boss. And then he was totally frozen. And I understood the situation. So I told him, okay, I will give you lifetime license to use Scala for free because you're doing my wedding. And then
legitimate license.
Up, and then you thought it was cool. Oh, thank God. He was like, he thought it was, And what's the chance of getting caught for piracy, But
by the guy that made it, that's hilarious. I mean, that's the thing. So obviously, you're going for that professional market, but then as we got, further into the 90s, multimedia became like a real buzzword, didn't it, in computers? When did you decide that you wanted Scala to be also more of a consumer product than just aimed at industry?
Well, the thing was, we started at the top, right, with the £1,400, and we had a version in Multimedia, which we brought up, which was just called Scala in the beginning, 1.0. And then we decided Multimedia started becoming a word, and we were like, Apple was talking about multimedia and stuff, and I was like, multimedia, isn't that what we do? Yeah, we do multimedia. Yeah, cool. Yeah, let's call it multimedia. Let's ride that wave. So that was MM100. And then the market for professional audiovisual, and editing and all that, the titling, it blew up because the Amiga was the first machine that could do those things. And of course, in Europe, we didn't have the video toaster. So there was no way. I mean, there's some enthusiasts would buy an NTSC video toaster and then use a scan conversion hardware to still be able to use it. But that took a little extra effort. So essentially, like you could say that for Europe and audiovisual multimedia stuff, Scala ruled out. And then in the States, it was a lot about the video toaster. It was like almost two different markets. But we were surprised to see that every time we lowered the price, and finally, we would like bundle an older version like MM100 with the Amigas, and then while we were selling 200, and then the sales would boom, and then we would make a video titler VT100, which was squarely at like the Amiga 500 with a Genlock sort of package that Commodore would put together this kind of video packages, for home video enthusiasts and so on.
You put it on cover discs as well, didn't you, on magazines, I remember too.
Yeah, so you go down there, and first you have the video titler, or Amiga 500. It was called Scala 500, I think. VT100, yeah, something like that. And that one was like, I don't know, £50 or less. And that started, and then lots of bundling, and then we're like, oh my God, we sold even more. And then we did the cover disc stuff. And then cover disc would be kind of limited, or at least limited save function or something. Or in the end, we just had like, okay, let's just bundle this thing and say, if you want the manual, send us 10 quid. And then what happened was, I don't know, it was like the mailman that came to our office in London. He was swearing because he almost broke his back because he had this huge bag full of £10 checks coming in. So we were like, no matter how far down you go, there's a new market audience, almost amazingly. And these are people who are just giving you, £10 because they want the bloody manual, which you don't need because it's so simple. So it's more like a support declaration. Like they wanted to. It's almost like a crowdfund.
Yeah.
So I learned never to underestimate. And you see now today, Apple is having the same in the App Store. They're having the same thing. Instead of selling your app for £20 or £20, charge £1 and sell more than 20 times more than, So there's this price dynamics, which are very interesting, that no matter how further down you go, your sales will explode. And of course, by 93, 94, there were, millions of Amigas out there. So it was possible to do these kinds of pricing schemes and cover discs and all that stuff. But you can say, yeah, we were, Scala was really two things. It was a really, really well-developed technology. with some fantastic developers. First, the 10 guys I had in Norway, and then as Commodore was starting to, or Commodore went bankrupt, I decided to go to Westchester and scoop up the guys I could get. So I hired, another 10, 12 guys from the old Amiga team. That was another fantastic story. So then we had Dave Haney now suddenly working for us,
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into that after the demise of Commodore, because that's a really interesting period. I'm interested in the branding of Scala as well, because the word is like, it's a staircase in Italian, isn't it, Scala? I mean, where did the name come from, and the idea behind the branding and the exclamation
this is
mark?
my friend Bjørn Rybakken, who's a legendary Amiga D-Paint designer. I mean, he worked in advertising and strategic design. He would design logos and stuff like that since early 70s, I think. It's a bit older than me. And we became really good friends back in 86, 87. Well, probably 87 after I bought my Amiga. That's why I got in touch with him. And he would draw in Deluxe Paint all the different Formula One cars each season, in pixel perfect drawings with the, 16 colors. He would just completely excel in making photorealistic, kind of like Jim Sachs, was another legend, Defender of the Crown and all that stuff. So he was up there in that level. And he would use Amigas for exclusively a lot for his work, with professional customers. And when I met him, he was like, "Okay, you need a new logo." And I have a logo in my drawer, and it's been there since the 1970s. And I've been waiting for a person that fits this logo, and that was that exclamation mark diagonally, with the red background. So he had actually designed that many years before he met me. And so my personality is kind of, and even Scala, as an expression tool, it really fit really well. So we use that exclamation mark for lots of different things. But then when Info Channel, when we needed a smaller version or a more consumer version, we looked for the name Scala, or looked for a name. So Bjørn and I were on the phone, and we're sitting in Yellow Pages, we're looking up and down, we're bouncing things back and forth, whatever. And eventually we it gelled around Scala, and then we realized, that means a scale of tones, a scale of colors. It means La Scala, the opera in Milano. It means so many different things. So it's perfect as a name for something that can do all those things, tones, colors, animations, everything. Yeah, essentially that name stuck, and then we decided that let's skip the Digital Vision name of the company, and just go for let's call the company Scala, because everyone's talking about, they are the Scala guys. So we're like, okay, we do Scala, and then we have Info Channel and we have Multimedia. These are the two products initially, and then we had the naming scheme, the MM200, 300, whatever, which is also cool because we didn't want to have the 1.0 and a normal.
Yeah.
We wanted something a little bit more industrial sounding, maybe like a Sony radio or TV or something, So we went with that, and I think all that worked really well together. So Bjørn, he designed the logo, the name, and he did the user interface, cleaned it up. Because I knew how to make it simple, but he knew how to make it beautiful.
It was really beautiful and iconic. And one iconic thing I do remember is, I think it was Scala MM400. They had La Scala Tour, which was a video of a guy doing the Indian ladder trick where he kind of climbs a ladder and disappears. And that was one of the example files. What was the process and the story behind that?
Well, that was me. I'm Lo Scalatore.
You are?
So first Bjørn, when he designed the Scala package, and we wanted something very different. We didn't just want to have classic Amiga looking package. So he came to me with this paper that you use for baking. And he had used a pencil and drawn this image of this guy standing in the middle of the field with this long ladder, and that became iconic image that we printed on our packages and so on. And so because Scala means, a stairs or a ladder or something like that, it really fit well. And we found out Lo Scalatore, that's the name of a climber. So of course, there's lots of nice associations. We decided to make a video. We went out in a field outside Oslo, and another guy was wearing all white. So he would hold up the ladder so that we later could remove him in Deluxe Paint And we, of course, we had to scan each and every frame using, I don't know, we used DigiView or something like that. So we had to scan frame by frame, edit every frame in Deluxe Paint. And of course, Amiga couldn't do video with colors since you only had 16 colors, and we had to do this in low-res as well because we needed to fit this thing to fit on a floppy, right? Otherwise, we couldn't distribute it with no point to making it. So the whole game was how then we made it like sit in a theater, so you were sitting in the back of the theater and seeing the smaller screen in front of you. So that was a trick to shrink the size of the video. And of course, then with black and white, so we decided, to use the whole, silent movie era kind of thing, because it had to be silent. But we found a really cool tracker song that had a East European sounding, very different, not one of those like techno sounding music, but they're really, with, I don't know, fiddles and accordions and stuff. I don't know, something like that. So we put that with it, and it got a really fantastic effect. And then so at the end of the video, when I'm climbing up the ladder, and the guy has been removed who holds it, and then I go outside the frame on the top, and then when we can then artificially pan the camera up, tilt the camera up, and then you can see that, the ladder is empty. The climber has just disappeared in thin air. So I think that was the first digital video ever made in Norway.
Well, one thing that I imagine really helped Scala get out there was the inclusion of the Scala player as well. I mean, was that really important to its success, do you think? And where did that idea come from? And explain kind of what that was for people that might not remember.
So that was for the Info Channel, because the Info Channel, you would pay £1,400, right, for the editing software and the ability to, and you would pay something extra for the Infonet so you could communicate. But then you didn't really need, if you had like 30 playback stations in, let's say, hotel chains, became a very important thing for us. The first customer was Plaza Hotel in Oslo, which opened in 1988. And King Olaf at the time, he opened the hotel in the lower foyer, and behind him was the Info Channel screens. So we were working all night to get that working before it came in. So that's like the tallest building in Oslo. And our first customer for hotels. And then, that was SAS Hotels in Radisson, which has a big chain. So then you started selling 30, 40, 50 copies at a time. And of course, they wouldn't pay for the full system. It would be more cost effective to just have a player costing, I don't know, 600 pounds. So like half price, let's say. And just stick those on the machines that were never going to be used user interface. They're just pure playback machines. So that was just a trick to sort of make it a little bit more affordable to put it into large chains, hotel chains, and then cable TV chains, and so on. And then, of course, when we started doing retail, and that was also the first in the world, the first ever that someone put a TV screen inside a shop in order to sell something specific, not using VCRs, but to use real-time, computer graphics. Which is now a huge industry, of course. I don't know, digital displays or retail, whatever they call it. It's like there are big expos and conferences and stuff all over the world, and Scala is still one of the biggest in that field. But
I think Lumpoly, the travel agents, did some in the UK as well.
Yeah, and I also remember we did a touchscreen-based one for Renault in France, in Belgium. And also hospitals in Netherlands, I remember the Queen would open a new hospital in Maastricht by pressing the screen, touch screen. Yeah.
You probably have to press it quite hard with those older touch screens, yeah.
Yeah, no, but it was like, when you go today, you go and configure a Tesla or something on the websites, and people say, oh, that's so fancy, you can change the color and stuff. Well, we had that in 1991, so with Renault.
I was wondering, did you ever resell any Amigas or anything? Because I saw there were a few Amiga 4000s with black and Scala written on the front, and I guess you might have sold some or rebadged some stuff and sold it for consumers and the full kind of package thing.
No, it was for some customers, if you had some customers would have, some data department, where they were hung up on, we only buy Hewlett Packard or we only buy IBM or whatever, So to get around that, we just said, this is you relabeled it and put Scala Workstation on it. So people forgot it had anything to do with Commodore, because when people thought Commodore, they would think, oh, Amiga, this is a games computer. We can't buy that. So we just hit it, and it worked really well. And the other thing we did is we did that for like, let's say, difficult customers. We could also mark up the machines, because nobody could check. The buyer wouldn't check how much they would really cost, discounted in retail stores. But then what happened is when Commodore went bankrupt in 1994, we had very close contact with Commodore in every country. So we dispatched people from our office down to Braunschweig, the European headquarters and in-store warehouse for Commodore. And then we managed to get there and buy all the remaining Amiga 3000 and 4000s and put them on a lorry and get them through. And they were almost stopped in the exit control there, whatever. But to tell them, no, stop, the company's bankrupt. We're not allowed to sell any more of the stock, but we already bought the rest. So we had a lorry full of Amigas, and that allowed us to keep selling info-channel systems for a couple of years after Commodore went under, and still be able to sell info-channel and make money while we were working so hard on the PC version.
So, John, what were your memories of the kind of collapse of Commodore and that time period as well?
Well, we had, as I said, very strong connections with Commodore and the management in all the different countries, in the UK and in Germany and France and in Scandinavia and even in the US. And I'd gone to visit Mehdi Ali, who was the CEO of Commodore, and let's call him the main culprit for the reason why Commodore went under. And I went to his office in Manhattan in some 46th floor somewhere. And I remember stepping in there and talking to him, and I realized he didn't have any computers in his office. Except one, which was an Amiga 500 Golden, which was hanging on the wall with like number 1 million sold. So certainly not being used. So I was thinking, this guy doesn't even use computers. How can he run this, huge company? And he had made a huge mistake where he'd sort of flipped the orders between the Amiga 1200 or Amiga 600 and I can't remember, and this 1200 or something. He mixed up the orders, and one was a lot more than the other one, but he made too many of one and too few of the other. And with the strained cash flow position, that was enough to tip the whole thing. And he saw that happening in real time. And by then, we also befriended all the developers, because we used to go to all the developers' conferences and party with the Amiga development diehards, especially Dave Haney and his ilk, and also Jeff Porter, who was head of engineering for the Amiga 2000, etc. So we knew this was coming, and I used to go with Jeff to different setup manufacturers, also TV decoder manufacturers in the US. We went to Scientific Atlanta, went to General Instruments. General Instruments was the biggest, and when we got there, they looked at us and they said, "Oh, yeah, well," he was trying to pitch Commodore's or Amiga hardware to them, and I was pitching the Scala sort of software. And they were like, "Okay, well, we have the hardware ourselves. We have our own MPEG decoder. But what we need is we need someone to write the software for our new first digital set-top box in the world." And so we got the contract to do that because we had the 68,000 experience. Luckily, it was a 68,000 based decoder. And because we already had MPEG experience and so on, but also that we had all the authoring software, so you could actually make the user interface for the set-top box from Scala, then transmit it via satellite and display it. And when we won that contract, they had already been talking to Microsoft and Apple. But Apple had no idea about. I guess they didn't hardly had colors at the time. Well, they had, I guess, the color version, but they had no idea about TV or anything like that. And Steve wasn't there, obviously. So Microsoft didn't have any relevant. They didn't even know 68,000. So they picked us, a small company from Norway, to make that software. And we delivered it. So now I needed to find developers, right? And so I knew that, Dave Haney and all those, Jeff helped me sort of, put together the right team. So with Peter Cherna and Mike Sins, and Dave Haney, Randall Jessup, Darren Greenwald, Jim Hornoff. There's so many of them that we were able to just pick and choose, because those guys didn't want to leave Westchester and their families, and their wives had jobs and everything in the area. So the alternative for them was to be hired by like Silicon Valley, in Silicon Graphics in Silicon Valley, or maybe 3DO, which was a games machine that was being touted at the time or on the way to the market. So I was able to maintain or grab most of them. And that was the reason why we were able to make this operating system very similar to the Amiga operating system. Multitasking, we call it MMOS, Multimedia Operating System, which we then ported to both the 68000 set-top box, but also to the PC running on DOS. And that wasn't easy, because we looked at Windows 3.1 and we cried. I mean, seriously, I remember all the developers sitting there just crying because someone had made a demo for us, so like what this could look like. Oh, horrible, So and then Windows 95 hadn't come out yet, and we were like, okay, we need to do at least let's kick this thing up in a memory mode, so you can get away from the 640K limit and all that. So we need to use memory extenders and stuff. And then we just implemented that multimedia operating system on top of that, and we wrote our own graphics drivers for all the different graphics cards on the market, like Zeng Labs and whatever they were called back then, Sound Blaster cards and so on. With plug and play. So we tried to recreate exactly the same Scala we had for the Amiga, but for the PC. And
did you ever have plans to kind of create your own Amiga, or maybe go for a buyout or something, especially after ESCOM?
Yeah. So first we had the proposal we brought to Mediali, which was to make the Scala Como. Como means a chest of drawers. So it was kind of like you can stack different modules on top of each other. So you would have like a base module, and then you would have maybe a CD-ROM drive, and that you click on top, and then a screen maybe that you can open up, and then a remote control so you could hold presentations. It was like audiovisual professional machine, but small and portable. And but that never materialized. But then when Manfred Schmidt of ESCOM bought Commodore, so then he invited me to get to know me. He invited me to come down to Formula One race in Monaco. So I was flown down with a private jet down to Nice, and there was black limos waiting on the VIP, and I was taken into Monaco, checked into a hotel where when I opened the door to my sort of garden, that was the stands, that people would sit on to watch the race. And he was a very flamboyant character, so we had a really good time and they partied on his boat, and on the whole thing was pretty much a blur, but it was a fantastic experience, And then we discussed all kinds of ways that we could collaborate to bring the Amiga back. But I mean, we were not the deciding factor in this, because they struggled to bring the Amiga back. But I mean, the deal was that, Scala would be bundled and so on continuously as before. And we also designed a new look for the Amiga, like a new front bezel that they would use, which I never think got into production. It was Björn Riebakken, I mentioned earlier, and myself, we sat down and sort of designed what it really could look like in order to be even more professional looking. No, it was just sleek, and it was more like the Silicon Graphics kind of, if you know those machines, Indigo and that kind of stuff, like more experimental looking plastic bezel, but of course it didn't cost any more. It was just, some of the Amiga, let's say the design, it was really good on the inside, but Amigas were never like sexy looking on the outside. Just let's be honest, except for the Amiga 1000, of course, which was gorgeous.
I think when the zip drive came along and suddenly like blue and purple plastics looked cool, didn't they, around that era?
Yeah, something purple plastic. So we had some different colors and different designs. I can't remember. I was just, you sort of made me remember back in my brain something I've totally forgotten. But so, custom hardware, we were definitely looking into that as well, because in order to sell this to like corporates, you just can't show up with an Amiga 1200, even if that was like a perfect, really machine.
Yeah, my kid's got one of those in his bedroom. He plays games on it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a fantastic machine. I mean, the 1200 for me is like, if I was I don't have an Amiga at the moment. I haven't had since then. But if I was going to get one, I would just get the 1200, because the 1200 had the 6820. It had had the AA EGA chipset. So you could get the 256 colors. Yeah, the 1200 was a sweet machine.
They were kind of banding around the Amiga Walker prototype with some Scala on there at the end of the kind of ESCOM era. Did you have any involvement with that at all?
Yeah, I think that was something like we were doing this industrial design of the unit itself, and sort of also trying to specify and say, look, if we're going to sell lots of our software, what would the hardware look like and perform like? And we already had the concept of the Como, so we're discussing all those things. But I think, they struggled so hard with, and because the developers had now, we had more of the Amiga developers than they had. So it was very difficult for them to restart the development of the custom chips. And at that time, it was really clear that Commodore should have brought out the AAA chips, around 1994. That would have led them into the market, like it would have been the strongest graphics station, sans, let's say, Silicon Graphics, but at least in like a normal price range, they could have ruled that market. But they fumbled the AAA because of poor management. But the AAA chip, that would have been a proper 24-bit, and that would have been a first of its kind. So
that was in development at the time, wasn't it, when Commodore went bankrupt and then it never got made,
Yeah, so, people started leaving and there was all kinds of conflicts, and people realized if you have bad management on the top, then the middle management layer started to get weak. And for instance, they hired this guy who was the head of the PC Junior, which was a huge flop for IBM. So, of course, Commodore hired that guy. And so on. So there was a lot of, let's say, poor management, given the fact that you have a CEO who doesn't know what a computer is or doesn't use it himself, then, it becomes kind of hard. So the whole thing just crumbled. But for me, the development team was so strong. So being able to recruit 12, I think, 11 or 12 of those, and just put them in an office down the road. I mean, they didn't have to move anywhere. That was like the advantage. And I remember Peter Cherna, who was like head of Intuition, I would call him and he was like, and I've been in discussions with him, and he was like, oh, Silicon Graphics just sent me some roses or some flowers or whatever. And I was like, flowers? You're Canadian, what's your address? I'll send you a case of Labatt's, So I sent him a crate of beer, and then he I think that was one of the key things actually. He kind of liked the corporate attitude we had in Scala. We had a pretty good party culture in the company, and we used to have these fantastic retreats where we would rent an island in Oslo Fjord just for us, and we would bring in huge PA speakers and stuff, and bring a band in, and with in June it would be like the sun doesn't set in Oslo or in Norway, so we just have these 48-hour parties where there was no night, just enjoy, and people would come in from all the different countries and join us, and they would be, those kind of things, legendary kind of. Plus, we used to party at the development conferences, and there was especially the one in Milano where we went crazy and kind of like rock stars, like destroying the rooms. Dave Haney, I remember, was there, and some of the other guys together with us, and then Leon, who was running our Dutch office, he got called down to the management, to the hotel manager's office the next day, and he said, Mr. Klinkers, there is a big brown spot on your bed. We don't know what it is, but we're working on it. And everything the lamp was broken. I don't know, all kinds of stuff was happening. We were just enjoying, it was like, we were rock stars back in the day, we had, when you go to exhibitions in especially in Cologne, they had the Amiga exhibitions, legendary, huge halls, packed with people, and even long lines outside. It was so bad you had to plan half an hour before if you want to go to the toilet. It was shoulder to shoulder. The whole thing was completely full. It would not be allowed to have that many people in the building today. And we would have a stand there, a huge stand. And of course our stand would be like a long bar. We had lots of beer and stuff, and then a big video wall, the ones where you just put the CRT monitors on top of each other in order to get the big video effect. Yeah. So we'd do that, and then so everything was happening in our booth. Everyone came to the Scala booth because we were so international. We also had a very when we did the international expansion, I have to say a little bit about that, because when I had the info channel and I sold 20 or 30 in Norway, and I was thinking, oh my God, what about the world? The world needs this. I need to sell more software, floppy disks, and basically I went to Denmark. I booked a small booth. It was like 4 square meters on an Amiga show in Copenhagen. And then this Danish guy comes by and he's like, what's this now? And I told him about it and how we're selling this thing. And he was like, this is a good opportunity to make money. Danes are very good at making money. So we set up a 50-50 company where we would own 50% and he would own 50% in Denmark. And then we used that same model. I went to the UK. I met with Barry Thurston, who was a sales director. And Dennis, there were 2 of them. And I was demoing this thing to them, and I was asking, do you know anyone in the UK who would like to start up a Scala office or local subsidiary here? And those guys, they were looking at each other behind my back. I didn't know, but then when I got home, the facts started pouring in from those guys. They were proposing that they would start Scala UK. So they didn't want to tell anyone else about it. They were just like, we'll do it, And they started up in the UK. We did the same thing in Netherlands, as I mentioned. We had Sweden. We had then eventually US by 1993, I think. And it started in the US by being distributed by GVP of hard disk, especially fame.
Great Valley Products, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. With Jared Bucas, who then who was he used to work in Commodore himself, and he would be the biggest company in extra peripherals, let's say, for Amiga, including a 24-bit board and some other interesting stuff. And they would then start selling a Scala in the US until we, maybe 1 year later, decided to set up our own office and then even move the headquarters to the US. And eventually Jared Bucas, he became the CEO of Scala, and I think he was the CEO for many years after I left. I left in 97, so yeah, I had a good 10 years run in Scala. But it was the Amiga part which was the most fun, because the Amiga had its own little bubble, and in that bubble we were kings. And so if anyone tried to compete with us, we would just completely eradicate them by copying their features and making it better. I remember there was a Dutch company that tried to make a Scala kind of clone. And they made a mistake of putting out a version where they put the spec sheet on their booth and said all those different things that Scala didn't have yet, but they said they had, So I took that spec sheet back to my developers, and I said, look, these guys, they think they are better at programming than us. And then lo and behold, before those guys had a bug-free version out on the street, we had all their features and totally eradicated their whole proposal. So they went bankrupt. So we were a bit brutal. And also we had our own, remember the fifth person that maybe I hired was a PR guy. And so this PR guy, he was like, I knew he was a journalist, and he came in and he's like, I don't know anything about computers. I said, perfect, you're hired. Because I needed someone to express what we did to regular people, not necessarily those who knew what computers were or Amigas or anything like that. And he would build up a massive press release system, and he would get the articles back from Amiga magazines all over the world. I still have some of those catalogs, and it would be like for a single month, let's say in 1992, there would be half-inch thick kind of compiled copies of all the different reviews we would get from Argentina and Australia and all over the world. I mean, we had Scala in 10 languages, translated 10 languages, and we even had Arabic and Hebrew right to left input long before anyone else had, even that. So we were very, very international, and we were, even Australia, let's say, was definitely one of our best markets.
I think testament to Scala today, it's actually still around. And I saw a really funny clip the other day, which was we had like a big crash of all the systems, for the train system. And King's Cross Station, they had a Scala logo bouncing around on a sign, and I was like, "That's amazing." Yeah,
I keep getting those.
It's great that it's still around.
I keep getting those. My daughter went to the library and then she's like, oh, there's a Scala screen, because usually you can't tell that it's Scala unless you really know, because you have to recognize the transitions and stuff. But very interestingly, even today, this many years later, Scala is the world leader in retail signage. And if you go into like a McDonald's in Hanoi in Vietnam, like the menu boards running there is running on Scala. It's just hard to know. But when the screen is idle or something else happens, you can see the Scala logo. So people are like, they take a photo, they send it to me, and it's like, hey, look what I found. And it was actually voted. It was voted the top digital signage company ahead of LG and Samsung.
And I love the fact as well that those humble beginnings started back on that Amiga that you got back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because even myself, when I remember the first time I saw the juggler.
Yes.
I just remember that's before I bought the Amiga. I found the juggler and I was just completely blown away. The whole hold and modify ham mode, and it was 3D and rendered. So that was like a peek into, that was like the first peek into like animated 3D graphics, like a Pixar, or the things that would come in the 90s. This was already like, that vision was already out with Amiga in 1985, 86. And I remember I became a pen pal with Eric Graham, who wrote The Juggler and later then Sculpt 3D. His mother was from Norway, so he thought it was cool with me. But anyways, the whole feeling of innovation and it's like a whole new world and all the possibilities, I haven't even felt that again until now with the AI boom that's happening now. That's like the next, I haven't been impressed by anything else for the last 30 years, like Macs and stuff. Okay, they're great, but so much later, than when Amiga, was able to do these things. So it wasn't really, but now with AI, we see like a whole different opportunity for computing and where it's going to go. Both on the graphics, but also, of course, on the knowledge base and having all the world's information at your fingertips. And to think about that, I started my career when the computers said beep, beep, and had the green text on a black background. And then now you're looking at like AI-generated video, So, I mean, it's a fantastically long sort of journey. And to be able to experience all that in one lifetime, for me, it's a fantastic gift. And but of course you have to see the trends, you have to jump on it, and you have to be passionate when you see something that clearly has capabilities that no one else can do. And then monetize that, stay in the game. If you're going to make the best product, you also have to make sure you have to make some money. And that was kind of like the thing with Scala, is we managed to build the company brick by brick, and we didn't actually take any investors until maybe after 5 years. So even as a startup company, it's kind of legend, because it's the first one. We were the biggest Norwegian software exporter in the 90s, early 90s, before companies like Opera and so on, and the browsers. But yeah, it was a fantastic story, and I really appreciate you guys contacting me about it, so I can go and fresh up remove some dust from the back of my brain and bring it back. It was a fantastic time, and it's fascinating to see that people are still so interested in Amiga, and that you guys have conferences, and you have this magazine, and you have everything still going on. That's it's truly amazing. So I hope this has been an interesting view sort of on the inside of what happened with Scala. It was an incredible journey.